Hey Mustangs, in this video we're going to take a look at bacteria and humans. So we have to remember what bacteria are. They are single-celled living things. They contain DNA, they require energy, they can reproduce, they're classified as decomposers, they're prokaryotes, so remember they have no nucleus, no membrane-bound organelles, they're very simple single-celled organisms. They're microscopic. We can't see them with the naked eye as individuals, and they are found everywhere. So we find bacteria on land, we find bacteria in the water, we find bacteria in the air floating around us, and we even find bacteria on our body and within our body. So bacteria literally are everywhere. So how do humans take advantage of this unavoidable relationship that we have with bacteria? All right, so humans have found different ways to use bacteria. First thing, we use bacteria to help with our digestion. Now, this actually isn't even by choice though, but we have bacteria living inside of our digestive system that help us break down our food. And in fact, if we wipe out these bacteria, we wouldn't be able to get all the nutrients out of our food like we do now. So we actually need these bacteria to get all the nutrients that we can out of our food. So they're very helpful bacteria. There are some harmful bacteria, but these good bacteria keep harmful bacteria in check. So these bacteria really are good for us. We've learned about these good bacteria, so we've actually created foods that contain it. So you've probably seen a lot of those commercials, those Activia commercials, where they talk about the yogurt has probiotics and all this stuff. What they mean by probiotics are bacteria that help with your digestion. So people who have problems with their digestion can actually eat these yogurts to get that good bacteria to help them with digestion. Another thing is making food. So there are several foods that you probably eat that bacteria were actually used to create. One is cheese. So cheese is created with bacteria. A really good example to see how cheese was created with bacteria is take a look at Swiss cheese. When you look at Swiss cheese, it has all the holes in it. That's actually where bacteria was living. So you can actually see the remnants of where the bacteria was when you look at Swiss cheese. Yogurt. So if you enjoy eating yogurt, yogurt actually has live bacteria, not just the Activia. The Activia has certain types of yogurt that help with digestion, but all yogurt has live cultures. If you actually look at the container, it says contains live cultures. What that means is it contains living bacteria. So bacteria is actually used to help yogurt get its flavor and actually create the yogurt. Medicine. Bacteria are very easy to manipulate when it comes to their DNA, because if you remember, bacteria can take in foreign DNA, read the instructions, and build whatever that DNA says. So we've actually taken advantage of that when it comes to medicine and medical advances in helping with diseases and stuff. So one example is the recombinant DNA techniques we have used, where we have taken a human insulin gene, so genes for making insulin, put it into bacteria. The bacteria read the instructions, make the insulin, and people who have diabetes can inject that insulin to help them control their diabetes. So that's one example. An interesting one is clean up oil spills. Oil spills have a disastrous effect on the environment wherever they occur, and we have actually found bacteria that can break down oil, which is very interesting and unique because oil is toxic to just about all living things. But these bacteria, they can actually help break down the oil. They can break it apart and help clean up the oil spill. All right, so big question, are all bacteria bad? The answer is no. In fact, most bacteria are good. We need bacteria. They're decomposers. They help recycle nutrients and waste. So bacteria are actually a really, really good thing. But this is one of those cases where one bad apple makes the whole bunch look bad. There are actually very few bacteria that cause sickness and disease in humans. There are way more bacteria that are the good bacteria that don't harm us. But because of those bad bacteria, we focus on bacteria, and people hear bacteria and they're like, oh God, those are gross, disgusting, they're going to make me sick, they're going to make me feel awful, they're bad, they're bad. But in fact, most bacteria are actually good. So the ones that the ones that can cause us harm, the ones that can cause us disease are known as germs. So that's a common term for them, or pathogens. And I want you guys to learn that term. So pathogens is just another name for bacteria that can cause disease and hurt people. Otherwise, if it's not a harmful bacteria, then we wouldn't call it a pathogen. All right, big thing. Definitely a test question here. So how do bacteria make us sick? There's two main ways. So first, they can tear apart our cells. And you might think, okay, why would they tear us apart? As a food source. Okay, so bacteria can tear apart our cells for food. So literally, if you picture one of our cells, bacteria comes along and it starts using enzymes to help tear apart our cells. So it literally kills our cells. And anytime your cells are dying, that's not going to make your entire body feel very good. So as they break apart your cells, your body starts to fight back and you don't feel very well, causing you to feel sick. Okay. Second way they can make you sick is release toxins. So some bacteria, when they get in your body, they don't necessarily start tearing apart your cells, but they naturally release chemicals that interfere with digestion and stuff like that. So a lot of bacteria that cause like food poisoning, for example, they're releasing toxins that interfere with your digestion and it causes cramps, it's very painful, and you feel awful. Okay, so those are the two ways. One, they break down your cells for food. Two, release toxins that interfere with your body's normal functions. All right. Actually, I'm going to go back real quick. One way you know that your cells are being torn apart. If you've ever had a sore throat before, so I want you to think about when you had a sore throat. And you know that nasty, disgusting taste you feel when you have a sore throat and your throat feels all swollen? When you're swallowing, not only are you swallowing bacteria, because a lot of sore throats are caused by bacteria, but you're also swallowing a whole bunch of your dead cells. Because when you get a sore throat, the bacteria gets in your throat and it starts tearing apart the cells in your throat. That's what causes it to feel very painful, and so also causes it to taste very nasty when you're swallowing and you have bad breath along with it as well, because your cells are being destroyed. All right, so how can you stay safe? There are things that we call vaccines, and we'll get into those. We'll talk a little bit more about those in class. So you can take a vaccine, which prevents you from getting sick. Also with bacteria, sterilization. If you heat something up to a really high temperature, bacteria are cells. So just like if you put your hand in hot water, it's going to kill your cells, get blisters and stuff, and a whole bunch of dead skin. With bacteria, it's the same thing. They're cells. So if you heat them up when the temperature gets too high, they can't survive that either. So when you heat your food up, when you boil water, you kill bacteria living in it. Disinfectants, these guys contain chemicals that can break the cell membrane down, interrupt proteins and stuff like that. And then finally, food processing. So canning foods is one way where we heat up food to a high temperature and then we seal it so that way no other bacteria can get in. Also, using refrigerators helps us to keep bacteria from growing too quickly. So even in our refrigerator, unfortunately, we have bacteria, but the cold temperature prevents them from being able to reproduce very quickly. It slows it down. All right, and then a couple obvious ones. Wash your hands. This is why you're always told to wash your hands before you eat. When you wash your hands, it basically gets rid of the bacteria. So that way when you're eating, you don't put it in your mouth. Also, when you rub your eye, that's another way bacteria can get in your body. Rub your nose, rub your mouth. Those are all ways bacteria can get in your body. So if you keep your hands clean, that's one way to stay safe. Another thing is we were always taught to cover our mouths when we sneeze, but that's actually not a good thing because you cover your mouth when you sneeze. Most of us don't get up and go wash our hands after we do that. So we're touching stuff, other people touch that stuff, and we're spreading things instead. We're spreading bacteria. So the best thing to actually do is to, when you sneeze in your shoulder or in the crook of your arm here to prevent bacteria from spreading in your sneeze or getting on your hands and spreading it that way. All right, are there any cures? So what happens if you do get a bacterial infection? We have antibiotics. So antibiotics are medicines that you can take that are going to kill bacteria. And it can do it in several ways. So here's just two examples right here. It can either block protein production, so it can prevent transcription and translation from happening. And if proteins can't be made, the bacteria is going to die. Another thing, it could prevent cell membrane transport, so it could prevent stuff from getting in and out of your cell membrane, and that can cause the bacteria to die. So antibiotics are a good thing, and we actually discovered them by accident when Alexander Fleming was performing experiments on bacteria, and he found penicillin mold growing in one of his petri dishes and noticed the bacteria was dead around it. So penicillin was actually one of the first antibiotics we had, where we took the chemicals from the mold and used that as an antibiotic, where you took that medicine and it would kill bacteria. All right, now there's a problem. When you take too much of an antibiotic, or when people take it unnecessarily, you actually cause natural selection within the bacteria to happen faster. So if you remember natural selection, individuals with the right traits will survive and reproduce. Well, if humans are taking antibiotics, any bacteria that has a trait where they can survive the antibiotic, where the antibiotic doesn't kill them, they're more likely to survive. So what we have actually seen is some bacteria have mutated and the antibiotic doesn't kill them. So when we take the antibiotic, it's going to kill everything else except for the bacteria that can't be killed. And I say immune because they don't have an immune system, but they just can't be killed by the antibiotic anymore. When those bacteria die naturally, let's say without antibiotic, other bacteria can come along and pick up that DNA, and now they cannot be killed by antibiotics. Okay, so here's an example. So here's a bacteria. We take an antibiotic, normally it's going to kill it. This mutant here, he can't be killed. He has DNA instructions that help him resist the chemicals in the antibiotics, and he can reproduce and make more and more of them, more copies of himself. Okay, so the problem comes when we overuse antibiotics. Taking antibiotics is a good thing, but we overuse them. Okay, antibiotics has saved millions of lives since the advent of antibiotics. Before that, soldiers on a battlefield, if their wounds didn't kill them directly, it was usually infection that killed them. So antibiotics have saved millions of lives. But you have to use antibiotics only when it's necessary. You can't just use it for like the littlest bacteria infection, and that's actually what we've started to do. It also goes along with the fact that doctors are overprescribing antibiotics. Now, I'm not saying all doctors. Doctors are awesome. But many doctors prescribe antibiotics even when they know it's not a bacterial infection. Some doctors prescribe antibiotics when it's a viral infection. And antibiotics do not work on viruses. Viruses and bacteria are two different things, just like humans and chickens are two different things. So when they prescribe these antibiotics for viral infections, not a good thing. Because what happens is you kill all the bacteria that can be killed with the antibiotics. Eventually, all that's left is bacteria that can't be killed. They keep multiplying, and that's all that's left is bacteria that can't be killed. So we have a huge problem on our hands. So unless you have a severe bacterial infection, you should not be taking antibiotics. But again, don't be like on your deathbed being like, Miss Palma said don't take antibiotics. It has to be within reason. You have to be an educated citizen on this one. So only take antibiotics if you really need it. Doctors, they need to prescribe antibiotics only when people really need it, and not just think about the money, because that's one of the biggest reasons why many doctors in the past and some today still continue to overprescribe antibiotics, because they think that they can get a lot of money. Every prescription they write for an antibiotic puts money in their pocket, so they get money that way. But a lot of doctors have stepped it up, and a lot of doctors are also realizing how big of a problem they're creating. Eventually, we're going to create bacteria that can't be killed at all by antibiotics. no matter how many times we try to create new antibiotics, eventually the bacteria is going to build up antibiotics resistance to it.